You're watching her from across the room and you notice something strange. She's laughing at jokes that aren't funny, leaning toward a man who doesn't seem particularly impressive, touching his arm in ways that feel deliberate. You wonder what he has that you don't. You've read the advice, tried the techniques, maybe even achieved some success, but there's always this nagging feeling that you're missing something fundamental, something that separates the men who naturally understand women from those who are forever trying to decode an impossible puzzle. What if the answer isn't in the modern dating guides or the pickup artist forums, but in the writings of a 16th century Florentine diplomat who never claimed to be a relationship expert? Niccolo Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. He looked at power, influence, and human behavior without the comfortable lies we tell ourselves about how the world should work. He saw how things actually function beneath the surface. When you strip away the historical context and the political intrigue, his observations about human psychology reveal patterns that show up everywhere, including in the dynamics between men and women. The reason most men struggle isn't because they lack confidence or good looks or money, though those things can help. They struggle because they fundamentally misunderstand what creates attraction and how influence actually works in intimate relationships. Think about the last time you really wanted something from someone. Maybe you needed a favor, or you wanted them to see things your way, or you hoped they'd choose you over someone else. What did you do? If you're like most people, you probably tried to convince them with logic, or you demonstrated your value, or you made yourself as appealing as possible. You presented your case like a lawyer arguing before a judge, believing that if you just made the right argument, they'd have no choice but to agree. This approach occasionally works in business negotiations, but it almost never works in attraction. Machiavelli would tell you that you're playing the wrong game entirely. The fundamental principle that changes everything is this understanding that attraction isn't created through direct pursuit or logical persuasion. It emerges from a specific psychological dynamic that Machiavelli observed in political power, but that applies equally to romantic relationships. People are drawn to those who seem to operate by their own internal compass, who pursue their own goals with quiet certainty, who create value and interest in the world around them without desperately seeking approval. This isn't about playing hard to get or following some manipulative strategy. It's about genuinely becoming someone whose life generates natural fascination because you're building something real. When Machiavelli wrote about fortune and virtue, he wasn't just talking about luck and moral goodness. He was describing something deeper about how successful people navigate an unpredictable world. Fortune represents all the things outside your control, the circumstances you're born into, the random events that shape your path, the choices other people make that affect your life. Virtue, in his framework, represents your ability to respond skillfully to whatever fortune brings, to shape circumstances through your actions and decisions, to create opportunities where others see only obstacles. Most men approach dating and relationships as pure fortune, believing success depends entirely on whether they happen to meet the right woman who happens to like them. They wait for the stars to align. Machiavellian thinking flips this completely. You develop virtue in this context by becoming genuinely capable and interesting, not fake interesting, where you memorize conversation topics and pretend to have hobbies you don't actually care about. Real capability means building skills that matter to you, creating things, solving problems, developing expertise in domains you find genuinely compelling. When you do this, something shifts in how you move through the world. You stop seeking validation because you're receiving feedback from reality itself, from the tangible results of your efforts. Women pick up on this shift instantly, often unconsciously. They can sense the difference between a man who's performing competence to impress them and one who simply possesses it as a natural extension of who he is. Machiavelli observed that people respect strength more than they respect goodness alone, but he also understood that strength without legitimacy eventually crumbles. In relationships, this translates to a crucial balance. You need genuine confidence and capability, the strength component, but you also need authenticity and emotional honesty, the legitimacy component. Men often emphasize one at the expense of the other. Some cultivate strength but present a facade, keeping their real feelings and vulnerabilities hidden, believing that any crack in the armor will destroy attraction. Others lead with pure emotional availability and niceness, hoping that being a good person will be enough. but they lack the backbone that signals they can handle challenges and set boundaries. The synthesis that Machiavelli would recognize as effective combines both elements. You develop real competence and confidence through action and achievement in your life. This gives you the psychological foundation to not need any particular woman's approval, which paradoxically makes you more attractive. But you pair this with genuine emotional presence, the willingness to be honest about who you are and what you want, the courage to be vulnerable in appropriate contexts. This combination is rare because it requires actual personal development rather than tactical maneuvering. Here's where most dating advice goes completely wrong and where Machiavellian thinking provides clarity. The advice industry tells you to follow scripts, use specific techniques, create attraction through particular behaviors. Open with this line: wait this many hours before texting. Demonstrate value by mentioning these things. Create jealousy through these actions. This approach treats attraction like a lock that can be picked with the right sequence of movements. Sometimes these tactics produce short-term results which reinforces the belief in the system, but they fail catastrophically in creating genuine long-term attraction because they're built on performance rather than transformation. Machiavelli would recognize this as focusing on appearance rather than substance. He wrote extensively about the difference between seeming to have qualities and actually possessing them. In politics, seeming can be enough in the short term because people judge leaders from a distance based on limited information. But in intimate relationships, seeming eventually collides with reality. She will discover who you actually are. The mask will slip, probably sooner than you think. If there's nothing authentic underneath, if you've built your approach entirely on tactics and performance, attraction will dissolve the moment she sees through the facade. This is why men who use manipulation techniques often experience success followed by dramatic failure, confusion about why women who seemed interested suddenly lose attraction and disappear. The more sophisticated approach, the one aligned with Machiavelli's deeper insights, focuses on actually becoming the kind of man who naturally creates attraction. This sounds obvious, but most people avoid this path because it requires real work and real change. It's much easier to learn a technique than to transform your life. But consider what actual transformation looks like. You identify areas where you've been passive or mediocre, where you've settled or given up. Maybe your career has stagnated, or your health has declined, or you've stopped pursuing creative interests, or your social circle has withered. You make the decision to change these things not because it will attract women, but because living at your potential matters more than comfort. As you make these changes, something unexpected happens. The changes themselves become less important than what the process of change reveals about you. You discover that you're capable of more than you believed. You build evidence that you can set goals and achieve them, that you can face discomfort and push through, that you can create value in the world. This evidence doesn't just change how others see you. It fundamentally alters how you see yourself. Your body language changes, your voice changes, the way you make eye contact changes, not because you're trying to display confidence, but because you actually feel differently about yourself based on what you now know you're capable of. Women respond to this transformation in ways that seem almost magical if you've spent years stuck in the trying to impress mindset. They become more receptive, more engaged, more available. Conversations flow more easily. Flirtation emerges naturally. The same women who might have been polite but distant before suddenly find reasons to spend more time with you. This isn't because you've unlocked some secret technique, it's because you're now operating from a completely different psychological foundation. You're not seeking their validation to feel good about yourself. You feel good about yourself based on what you're building in your life, and their interest becomes a pleasant addition rather than a desperate necessity. This is where Machiavelli's insights about power dynamics become directly applicable. He understood that the neediest party in any relationship has the least power, not because power should matter in healthy relationships, but because neediness fundamentally distorts the dynamics of attraction. When you need someone's approval to feel worthwhile, you unconsciously communicate that you believe they're above you in value, that they're doing you a favor by giving you attention. Most people pick up on these subtle signals even if they can't articulate exactly what they're sensing. The dynamic feels off, like someone is trying too hard, like the relationship isn't between equals. By contrast, when you're genuinely engaged in building a meaningful life, when you have goals and projects and relationships that matter to you beyond any individual romantic prospect, you naturally relate to women from a position of equality, not superiority, which is its own form of dysfunction, but genuine equality. You're interested in who they are, you're curious about their thoughts and experiences. You're willing to walk away if the connection isn't right because you have other valuable things in your life. This attitude, when it's authentic rather than performed, creates the psychological space for real attraction to develop because she can sense that you're choosing her rather than desperately clinging to any option. Machiavelli also understood the importance of timing and reading situations accurately. He observed that the same action can succeed brilliantly in one context and fail catastrophically in another, depending on circumstances. In relationships, this translates to social and emotional calibration. You learn to read subtle signals, to sense when someone is interested versus just being polite, to recognize when pushing forward will create connection versus when it will create discomfort. This skill doesn't come from memorizing indicators or following flowcharts. It develops through experience and through genuine curiosity about understanding people, rather than just trying to get what you want from them. Think about what happens when you approach interactions with real curiosity instead of agenda. You ask questions because you actually want to know the answers, not because you're following a list of conversation topics designed to build attraction. You pay attention to her responses, noticing what lights her up, what makes her more animated, what topics she returns to naturally. You share your own perspectives honestly rather than calculating which version of yourself will be most appealing. The conversation becomes real because you're both actually present rather than performing roles. This authenticity that emerges from genuine confidence creates a powerful filter. Women who are looking for someone they can manipulate or control lose interest because they can sense you won't play that game. Women who want a project they can fix or save also drift away because you're clearly handling your life. What remains are women who are attracted to actual partnership, who want to be with someone whole rather than someone broken they can repair. This filtering process might feel limiting at first, especially if you're used to getting attention through performance or neediness, but it's actually liberating because the connections that do form have the potential to be substantial. Machiavelli wrote that it's better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both, but he also noted that being hated is dangerous and should be avoided. In romantic contexts, this translates to something important about boundaries and standards. You need to be willing to disappoint people, to say no, to walk away from situations that don't serve you, even when doing so creates temporary discomfort or conflict. Men who try to keep everyone happy, who avoid any action that might upset a woman they're interested in, who constantly accommodate and defer hoping this will create attraction, typically find themselves in the friend zone or in relationships where they're not respected. Setting boundaries isn't about being aggressive or domineering. It's about knowing what you will and won't accept, what matters to you, where your lines are, and then calmly maintaining those standards regardless of how others respond. When you do this consistently, something counterintuitive often happens. The boundaries themselves become attractive because they signal that you value yourself, that you have standards, that you're not desperate for any relationship on any terms. Women who are secure and self-aware typically respond positively to this because it indicates you'll be a partner who can maintain their own identity within a relationship rather than someone who will lose themselves trying to make them happy. The strategic element that Machiavelli would emphasize is understanding that attraction operates on multiple timescales and requires patience. The techniques that promise immediate results often work precisely because they create a sense of urgency or scarcity that triggers short-term responses. But relationships that matter, relationships that last, relationships that bring genuine fulfillment usually develop more gradually. They require trust to build, compatibility to reveal itself, shared experiences to create connection. If you're only optimizing for quick results, you'll miss the relationships that could have been meaningful because they needed more time to develop. This doesn't mean being passive or waiting indefinitely for things to happen. It means combining action with patience, making your interest clear while also giving situations time to unfold naturally. You express attraction when you feel it. You create opportunities for connection. You take initiative in moving things forward. But you also pay attention to reciprocity, to whether she's meeting you halfway, to whether momentum is building or stagnating. You're willing to invest time and energy into something promising while also being honest about when something isn't working and choosing to redirect your energy elsewhere. The ultimate insight from applying Machiavellian thinking to relationships is that everything comes back to genuine personal power. Not power over others, which is what manipulation seeks, but power over your own life, your own choices, your own direction. When you cultivate this kind of power through actually building something meaningful, through developing genuine capabilities, through maintaining standards, through being honest about who you are and what you want, attraction becomes a natural byproduct rather than an elusive goal you're chasing. You're no longer trying to unlock women or figure them out like they're puzzles to solve. You're simply living your life well and inviting interesting people to join you in that journey. This transformation requires you to give up certain comforting narratives. You can't blame circumstances or claim that women are irrational or insist that nice guys finish last. You have to take full responsibility for becoming someone worth choosing, not because you should have to prove yourself, but because that's how attraction actually works in the real world. You have to accept that skills you don't currently have can be learned, that aspects of yourself you don't like can be changed, that the quality of your relationships is largely a reflection of the quality of person you've become. This is simultaneously harder and more empowering than following tricks and tactics. Machiavelli's work ultimately presents a choice that applies as much to personal relationships as it does to politics. You can hope that fortune will smile on you, that circumstances will align perfectly, that the right person will appear who sees your value without you having to develop it, or you can cultivate virtue. In his sense of the word, becoming someone whose capabilities and character create opportunities regardless of circumstances. The first path feels easier because it requires no change from you. The second path demands real work and real growth, but it actually gives you influence over outcomes rather than leaving you at the mercy of random chance. If you found these ideas challenging or uncomfortable, that's often a sign that something true has been touched on. The comfortable lies we tell ourselves about relationships don't create the friction that truth does. If these perspectives resonate with how you've seen attraction actually work beneath the surface level advice, then you're already starting to see the dynamics more clearly. The question is what you'll do with this understanding. Will you use it as another set of tactics to perform, or will you allow it to inspire genuine transformation in how you live your life? Subscribe to this channel if you want more insights that cut through the comfortable lies about human nature and relationships. Leave a comment below sharing which Machiavellian principle resonates most with your experience, or tell me what aspect of attraction and influence you'd like explored next. The conversation continues beyond this video, and your perspective matters in building a community that values truth over pleasant fiction.